I'm Feng Zhu, and I'm lecturer in games and virtual environments, and my talk is entitled Attending to One's Own Playstyle, the Reflexive Ascesis of Gameplay. And today I'd like to talk about forms of attention involved in computer gaming. So when we think about gaming, we might think about how players train their mind-body capacities to increase their decision-making or to speed up the number of inputs that they can enter on controllers per minute. And in some cases, like with StarCraft, a player like Losera, they're able to reach upwards of 800 actions per minute. And Greek philosophers might call this ascesis, rigorous training, practice, development. And the English aesthesis has more connotations of self-renunciation about it. So I think the Greek is preferable. But in the acquisition of any kind of skilled practice, there must also be self-reflexivity. Practice is not just a function of the amount of time that one spends. It's also about reflecting on what you do and adjusting that, tweaking it, changing it if necessary. So this self-reflection is something that skilled practitioners need to engage in, and we could think of it as a way of interrupting a habituation process, a way of maybe reforming it anew, and a way in which individuals then attend to themselves, the way in which they attend to their own becoming. And we could think about this also as a metacognition, or thinking about thinking, and this seems especially pertinent when we talk about strategy games. And Kasparov, for example, has talked about chess players and how chess players also need to be intimately aware of the methods that they use to reach their decisions. They need to know this, and they need to also understand their own emotional states as they do so. So what's the exact form that this attention takes in different games? Well, you may have come across or heard of the game, the trading card game, Magic: The Gathering, which is a game that I'm quite interested in. And here I've looked at a pro player, Cordo Calls, of a digital version of Magic, and how he made his own playstyle visible to himself. And he did this through thinking about his own thinking, through utilizing certain tools, which then made that visible. And he deployed a variety of techniques and tools in order to turn his own playstyle into an object of knowledge that he could then reflect upon and change. And very prominently among these tools were statistical tools, such as data accumulated from player behavior on 17lands.com. And indeed, increasingly, our own understanding of our play and our gameplay is informed by the use of such tools. And we might think about gameplay in sort of numerical terms and so on. So all of this raises questions concerning how our self-reflexivity is constituted through techniques and technologies. And Michel Foucault said that it is the forms of reflexivity that constitute the subject as such. So there's a great deal of importance attached to that. And he and Hadot had looked at the history of such forms, the history of spiritual practices that require particular kinds of vigilance and control and attention to oneself. And we could indeed think about some of the practices demanded by contemporary gameplay as falling into that history or that tradition. And some of the very complicated games, or games with sufficient complexity at least, like Magic: The Gathering, might leave open a room for player intuition and gut instinct as a sort of zone of contestation outside of what numbers might seem to show. So how can we shed light on the exact form of the attention in a particular game and what's required? Well, we could, for example, deploy what sociologist Vacant called a carnal ethnography to chart the acquisition of a skilled practice, to chart the obtaining of this embodied know-how or habitus, which is also to include a description of the development of a certain form of attention to oneself. So I think that a carnal ethnography of gaming can call for attending to the way in which one self-reflexively attends to one's play. And I think it's also along these lines that Claire Carlyle has written about a discerning familiarity with habit itself. So about sort of acquiring this familiarity or understanding of how habit works within us. And I think just to finish, all of this can be with a view to answering questions concerning, well, how do the forms of self-reflexivity required in games, how do they influence or shape forms of self-reflexivity that we practice outside of games, and also vice versa? And then the final question is, how are we constituted, or how do we constitute ourselves as attentive subjects of ascesis through these practices? And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.